We are now recording the meeting, just so everybody's aware. So we'll call the meeting to order at 6:33. First order of business, as always, is to review and make any changes to the agenda. Hey, Suzanne. So I have 3 additions to the agenda. These are 3 things that came in over the weekend or today. First item to be added is just a discussion on the warrants or payment authorizations that we usually typically do at the meeting. Item number 2 is a dog bite report that we got. And then the third one is an added item around just some road crew personnel discussions. That's going to take place most likely in executive session, just as a heads up, because it's talking about employment. So those are the 3 items that I've got to add.
I have one under water commission issues.
Yep.
I got a request from Morgan Daybell for the Black Lantern Inn to install a sprinkler line, 4-inch line into the building. So I just wanted to bring that up.
So we'll add the Black Lantern request under water commission issues.
Okay.
Any other changes to be made to the agenda? All right, hearing none, we'll jump into the approval of the minutes from November 16th. Do we have
I'll make a motion. I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of November 16th.
Great. We have a motion from Mark to approve the minutes. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
We have a second from Leanne. Is there any discussion on the minutes? Hearing none, we'll vote. All those in favor of approving the minutes as written of November 16th, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Abstention.
1 abstention from Jacob. Great, motion carries. Thank you. Moving on, Public Works. First up is roads and bridges. I'm not aware of any grant updates. This is just a typical item that we have on the agenda. Mark or Michael, any grant updates? And Michael, you're muted, just so you know, so make sure you unmute. Still muted. Yep, one more time. There you go. Oh.
Okay, you hear me now? Sorry about
Good.
that. Just the grants John Little was asking about. Did that turn out to be anything, or?
That was the discussion we had back with them back when they were closing the grant period for the wild and scenic grants. And
Yeah.
at that point, and at that point, nothing came of it. We were going to circle back when they opened up the next round for that.
Okay. Yep. So I had applied for one grant. The individual was supposed to come out and look at the road sites and things. He had to quarantine for COVID, and I haven't heard anything back from him since. So I don't know where that one stands. There was no money available anyway, but we applied just in hopes.
Yep. Great. Anything else under grant updates?
I don't have anything.
Okay. If not, we'll move on. Item number 2 under roads and bridges. This was the class 4 roads policy carried over from the last meeting. As a refresher, we had made some revisions to the policy just to clarify the liability and indemnification sections. And then we were going to take another look at the application to see if there were some amendments that could be made there to clarify kind of the scope and duration of work, whether it was an individual project or kind of an ongoing blank check to do work as needed. I have not had a chance to circle back and take a stab at that yet. I've had a few other things that have taken up the bandwidth between then and now. So if it's okay, I'd like to table the discussion on the application amendments until the next meeting. I do want to make some space though for any further discussion on the class 4 road policy. And I will note that Howard, who's on the call, I've talked with him by email a couple times. And so I do want to make a space now, Howard, under this topic if you want to add anything or share some thoughts around that you had. So Howard, the floor is yours if you want it. Yep.
Okay. I'm a little concerned that we need to make sure that some of these people on a class 4 road, they get a tractor, and they put a blade on the back, and they think they know what they're doing, and they mess up the road. Now, I admit that, yeah, I've done some work on the class 4 road before. I've hired Paul Sylvester to, drop off a couple of loads of gravel and give me, a 6-inch spread or so to make the road better. What I don't appreciate is I have done that and had a person on the class 4 road take his tractor and his blade, and he took and drug all that gravel and spread it all over the place. So all of a sudden there's maybe an inch or two left, which is useless on a road. When you, if the road's got problems, you fix it with a load of gravel. You don't sit there and try to scrape it from someplace else. And I am concerned that I'd like to see people have to get a permit. And if I want to spread a load of gravel, I don't mind coming down and getting a permit. But it would be nice that says they get a permit. Hey, take your tractor and your grader and your blade on the back of your tractor and quit ruining the road. So I guess that's my biggest concern. And I'd like to see it say something that says the road commissioner gets to decide whether somebody can do something or not. Because if somebody says they want to grade the road, he might look at it and says, no, you fix it by bringing in a load of gravel, and have him approve it. And if they don't do it right, they become financially liable to have it fixed right. If the town has to come in there and repair what the person did, the person who did it now pays the bill. And we keep, and we don't need too many lawyers with too many trying to define everything, how you do something. That just gets you into trouble. I mean, you got a road commissioner who's forgotten more probably about how roads should be done than most people, because that's what he was hired for, right? So, I learned a lot years ago from Billy Baker. Now, I know some people loved him, some people hated him, but he really knew how to fix a road, because he fixed our road once, and it was fantastic it seemed like forever and a day until somebody, and I got a place up on West Hill, up on Class 4 area, and that's just my 2 cents, okay? So I appreciate the time.
Great, thanks, Howard. Yeah, I think your points are well taken, that we should probably we need to be more explicit with our approvals for work and how they are essentially granted and then followed up on. I think one of those things that's easy to slip through and just give verbal approval for stuff. I know I've done it in the past, and it's worked okay. But I think that your points are all spot on, and so that's hopefully stuff that we will try to work into this review of the application process to make sure that it's streamlined and efficient, but also hits all the marks we need it to about quality of work and condition and approval. So thanks very much for offering your thoughts there. Anybody else have anything on this topic before we move on? Again, we'll pick it back up, but we'll table it for tonight. Okay, hearing nothing, we'll move on to buildings and grounds. First item under here is just carried over. Again, this is the 98 Main Street location. Still have not had any formal correspondence from the post office on this. I think we did mention the last meeting, there's been some rumors around things maybe happening, but nothing formal. So I've got it on my list this week to formally reach back out to the post office to basically say, hey, you know, we're coming into budget season. We have to make some decisions about things, and basically say, we need you guys to give us an answer on what you're going to do, because it's been close to 6 months since we gave them our answer. So we need some clarity here. Then item number 2 on buildings and grounds that we've got here is just the public service building town office renovations. Jacob and I have a call scheduled for tomorrow morning to get the ball rolling on the RFP we've discussed. So we're going to actually start to get that process underway so that we can make some movement there. Anybody else have anything under buildings and grounds? Michael, anything you want to add?
No, I got a little information for the charging station, but I see that's later on the agenda.
Okay, great. Only other note around buildings and grounds that I'll add, just because it falls kind of under this category, is that the second public hotspot was installed last week at the Grange Hall. So Montgomery now has 2 public hotspots for Wi-Fi. One is at the public service building. So anywhere out in that parking lot, you should be able to get a very high-speed, strong internet connection on a wireless device. This new one is at the Grange Hall. You'll actually see it if you look up under that door that leads to nowhere off of the mezzanine level. It's affixed to the building right there. So that should give coverage to the entire Grange Hall parking lot and out in front of the building. That is active and it's working. We are trying to switch the service from Fairpoint to Comcast so that it'll be a better, stronger connection and not kind of at the whim of Consolidated's operations, as it tends to be on an awful lot. So that'll hopefully get switched soon, but as of now, there are now 2 public Wi-Fi hotspots in town. So you can help spread that news for folks that need it. Okay, last thing under buildings and grounds is under public works is just the FEMA update. Only update here is that we're continuing to get our projects in to FEMA and then certified. We've got 3 of them fully signed off on as of now. Still have not received any payments yet, but I'm hoping that given that we've given the final sign off on at least 3 of these, we'll start to see some funds roll in the near future. I'm not aware of any other community that's received any money yet either, so I don't think we're, you know, out on our own on this front. And again, you know, as I've said in the past, huge thanks to Michael and Aaron for helping slog through a lot of this stuff. It's a lot of paperwork and a lot of chasing down numbers and things. So it's a pretty big time suck, but really appreciate you guys laying into it.
Thank you.
Anything else under public works?
I don't have anything for this evening.
Okay, great. Nothing from you, Mark? Okay, great. So with that, if there's no objection, we'll move right into visitors. We usually go in the order that folks joined the meeting or hopped onto the call nowadays. So I think, Merle, I think you were the first visitor that I saw pop on. So do you have anything for visitors tonight?
Well, I probably ought to come more often. I wouldn't have as much.
Okay.
I guess kind of curious, keep changing the website. I thought we had a really, really good website and was able to get used to it and navigate. And
Yep.
It's just like Microsoft and all of them. How come you keep changing?
Yeah. So we did talk about this at the last meeting maybe, or the one before, but Zach is currently in the process of redesigning the website. And so the one that's up there now is essentially just a bare bones placeholder. I talked to Zach again Friday, and the intent is that after the first of the year, we're going to try to launch the new website. So this one, we fully acknowledge, is lacking functionality. And is not by any means better than the old one, but it is temporary. So that should be fixed, January.
Yeah, so why do you keep, my credit, I'm just curious, why do you keep changing? What was wrong with it the way it was?
Well, there were some improvements that we thought we could make. I apologize. My internet connection is a little unstable. So if I keep getting stuck, I might turn my video off. Can you guys hear me okay right now? Yeah, I mean, the functionality of the last one was good. There was just some improvements over a few months prior to COVID. We had talked to a number of people in the community, different boards and things, and had kind of a list of improvements that we could get made. And so that was feeding into a redesign of the website. Things got slowed down and postponed because of COVID. But the intent was to just continue to improve upon it.
That probably explains a couple things. I joined the last meeting. I guess I hit something and I booted myself. And I spent about 20 minutes trying to get back in, and I could not get back in to save my soul. And then today, I don't know if the others can, but for the life of me, I could not print out the second page of the agenda. I tried everything. But I get maybe that's something to do with the website. I don't know. Maybe the rest of you printed it out, but for some reason I couldn't.
Okay.
Not that's important anyway. I guess the last thing, I know at one point it talked about there's going to be perhaps more public discussion on the streetscape part. Is that going to happen, or is that?
Yeah, no, that's definitely going to happen. Right now, the main thrust of what we're working on is trying to, again, nail down the financing elements of it. And we are definitely going to re-engage the streetscape portion of the work. There's two kind of variables here. One is how we do that. Is it through a Zoom meeting? Do we kind of postpone those decisions until we can get together in person, whatever that might be? So kind of the format of those discussions is one area we have to nail down. And the other one is that up until now, all the work we've been doing on the project has been funded through these engineering planning advances that is essentially money that we don't pay back if the project does not advance. The thought being that we don't want to essentially put any town funds at risk if we don't have to. We are currently waiting for the next installment of those funds to be approved by the state, and that will give us the green light to then bring Hoyle Tanner back in for some of these discussions. Essentially, we didn't want to keep that ball rolling until we knew we had this no risk, low risk money with which to do it. So hopefully that's going to come through soon, and we can then re-engage in that process.
Yeah.
But long story short is the intent is most definitely to re-engage the community conversation around those design elements.
Okay. It slipped me. I had something came out, but I forgot I slipped it. So go ahead, go on.
Okay, thanks, Merle. Sue, did you have anything for visitors?
No.
No? Okay. Howard, did you have anything else that you wanted to offer for visitors?
Hey, I said my 2 cents earlier, so
Okay.
I'm done.
All right, thanks, Howard. And then Michael, did you have anything that you wanted to chat about that wasn't on the agenda or outside of stuff? I think that was a no, so we're good.
No.
Okay, thanks. All right. So with that, we'll keep moving on the agenda. Next is Water Commission issues. The added item here was the Black Lantern request. Mark, do you want to go over that?
Yes, so Morgan Daybell sent me a request. The Black Lantern needs to put a sprinkler system in. They need a 4-inch line to go into the building. I told him he talked to me about it beginning of the summer, and I said, this isn't going to be a good time to, to do that, because most contractors are done for the season. So I'll get with Ross and we'll try to get a price together, but I just need approval for the application from the board, and then we'll move ahead and get prices and see when we can get it done.
Okay. Just by way of clarification, because we don't do this that often, and so I always have a hard time remembering. So this new curb stop is to support their fire suppression system. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So this would be a new curb stop. So there'd be the associated fees there.
Well, there's,
oh, go ahead.
we don't, there's some, I gotta look at the, when we did the inn, I think there's some fees that we don't charge for putting in a sprinkler system line than we do for a residential line.
Okay.
So I'll look at the permit we had for them and see what we charged them.
Okay.
But
great.
we'll have to dig down to the main line, tap the main line, and run the 4-inch line in with a shut off valve. But it's a little different pricing for a sprinkler line than it is for a residential line.
Okay, great. That was my question, was how we treated that. But yeah, so if we can dig into the precedent for that, and we'll keep it going. Good.
I'll work with Ross and we'll try to get some prices together for him.
Okay, great.
But I don't see us getting it done till, probably spring, but I don't know if he needs it done before that, but
Okay.
I was hoping you get it in before now.
Yeah. You mean before the ground freezes, Mark? Come on.
Yeah, yes. Yeah.
Merle, I saw your hand. Did you have a question or something to add to that?
Yeah, I know what it was now. Your amendments to the class 4 road, is that on the website somewhere?
It is. It might be difficult to find, again, given how things are listed under the documents section, but I can email you a copy of that, Merle, if you want.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks. Okay.
Yeah. So circling back to Mark's request, it sounds like we need a motion to approve the additional curb stop for the Black Lantern Inn, the water connection. Do we have an amendment to approve the new connection for the Black Lantern? I see a hand from Jacob, so we have a motion from Jacob. Is there a second? Second from Suzanne. Excellent. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. All those in favor of approving the new curb stop for the Black Lantern, please signify by saying aye or raising your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Great. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great. Motion carries. Thank you.
Okay, I'll go work on that.
Thanks, Mark.
Okay, anything else under Water Commission? Nope, great. I will note that I have heard that since the flow testing we've done, we have had at least 2 instances where that has the information's come into play with actual things people needed in the community regarding, can't remember what at this point, but I remember talking with Ross, and that information is now being used and it is being supportive. So it's already showing the benefits. So moving on to old business, first item here is just the item that we carry through to each meeting, which is just the COVID-19 topic and anything regarding the local response to that. I don't have any specific news on that front other than, this is one of those periods where we actually went 3 weeks without a meeting. And as I'm sure that everybody who lives in this town realizes that in the last 3 weeks, COVID has kind of gone from something that Montgomery has seen to now something that Montgomery is experiencing. The last check that I made of the state's website showed that as of Friday, we had 13 active cases in town. I don't know who they are or where they are or anything like that, but it is in the community. I have a few people have reached out to me with some concerns around a couple local businesses just not completely following the state guidelines on things. And so I have reached out to a few people just to kindly remind them that they need to be following these guidelines. And based on what I've seen, it looks like they're being responsive. If that concern does continue and we do note businesses who are not following the COVID-19 guidelines around masking, distancing, spacing, things like that, we might have to take some more heavy-handed action. But as of now, I think we're hopefully in an okay direction on that. Floor is open for this topic. Anybody who has anything to add or jump in on, feel free to unmute and hop in.
There's like so much to say and kind of nothing to say all at the same time. It kind of feels like nothing germane other than like, wow, it's really intense.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Well, we don't have to have a long-winded discussion around this. I always want to make some space at these meetings for the board to discuss this topic if there's things that we want to talk about. You know. So okay. Well, we can move on from that topic. The next item up here is the electric vehicle charging stations. As you recall, at the last meeting I did note that I spoke with Doug, and he is moving forward with trying to get the work done before winter really sets in. I have not had any updates from Doug at this point. Michael, you mentioned that you had something on this topic you wanted to add.
Yes, I was there on site with Doug.
Great.
The sonotube for the foundation has been installed. It's in the ground and backfilled. And he's hand dug and he's got the conduit run. So what's under or in the frozen ground has been completed.
Awesome.
He's researched a path for his wires to run his wires underneath the front half of the Grange, which was, after we got the access open, was rather interesting exploring around under there.
Yeah. Yep.
So he's made good progress on it.
Good. Awesome. If you find that coffee can Tosca used to talk about as being, let me know.
Well, I tend to get under that section again in the summertime if I have a moment, do some looking.
Yeah. Okay, great. Awesome. Well, that's great. I'm glad that that is moving forward, so we can get that done. So Suzanne had to step away for a sec. She'll be right back, it looks like. Anything else on the EV charging stations before we move on from that topic? All right, hearing nothing else on that topic, let's move on. And if there's no objection, I'd rather jump to item D, which is town meeting planning first, because that'll feed into some of topic C. So town meeting planning, as we've been discussing, this is still kind of a moving target as we get closer to town meeting and we see what's happening with COVID, what the state is allowing for and or giving us guidance around. The latest information that we've had is that there's a really good chance that the legislature may pass two items that would allow municipalities to, one, unilaterally just change the date of town meeting. So we could potentially just say town meeting is going to be in May, if they allow us to do that. You'll remember that another option that we have under the current rules would be to essentially have town meeting on town meeting day. And if we wanted to hold an in-person meeting, we could essentially gavel the meeting to order at the Grange Hall and then immediately move to recess the meeting until a future date, which we could then choose to be May or something. The trick there is that if we did that, we would still have to have all of the items essentially ready to go by the dates they would have to be anyway, because we'd be recessing the meeting with the exact same warning items and all that kind of stuff. The ability to potentially unilaterally just change the date of town meeting would be different in that we would then have more time to essentially finalize the warning, finalize the budget. You remember that our current budget now goes through June, the end of June. And so even if we did push town meeting until May, we still have an operating budget that's been approved by the voters. So I guess my main point here is that if the legislature does allow us to unilaterally move the date of town meeting, we could vote to do that and then basically push the discussions around the budget and the warning until a later date. And if they don't, we would then still have to hold town meeting on town meeting day, with the options of one, doing an immediate recess to a future date, or two, holding it on town meeting day. But then the choice there is to either hold it electronically on a platform like Zoom or hold it in person. So this is kind of like one of those choose your own adventure novels that we had as a kid, where it was like, do this, turn to page 37. So there's some choices the board has in front of us. The first is, do we want to actually have an in-person, try to pull off an in-person town meeting in March? If the answer is no, then the question is whether or not we want to have town meeting in March, but on this platform, essentially, in which case it would be informational meeting and all the voting would be done by Australian ballot. Again, the ballots would have to be drawn up and done on that timeline. Or again, do we then push town meeting? Is this making sense to people? I feel like I'm rambling a little bit. So the legislature has the ability potentially to pass a bill to allow us to unilaterally move town meeting to a much later date. That's probably the cleanest way that they could do that. The trick there is that practically speaking, the legislature probably couldn't do that before the week of January 15th, because they don't get back into session until, I want to say, the 7th. You've got the inaugural stuff happening, and then that next week would be when any bills that could be fast tracked through committees out the floor of the governor's office. The problem there is that we would have to have the warnings and the ballots ready to go like that following week if that wasn't an option. So if we put our eggs in that basket and they don't do it, we'd still not need to have everything ready to go as far as warning town meeting for March. So provisionally, we could talk about what we want to do. We'd still have to have that in place for that option. Because as a reminder, we would have to have all the ballots for anything printed by mid-January so that they could be available to voters at least 20 days before the election. The first day to post the warning for town meeting is January 21st. So again, it's a narrow window there that we're looking at. So I guess in terms of practically speaking, the mechanics of town meeting, I guess the first question that I want to open up to everybody is, do we have a consensus on whether or not we want to try to hold an in-person town meeting this March?
I don't think it's going to be safe by then for people to get close together. It doesn't sound like the vaccine is going to be available far and wide until next summer, from the sounds of things that I've been hearing on the news.
Okay, yeah. Jacob or Mark, any thoughts around this that you want to?
Yeah, I'm not wildly optimistic about the legal and safe, likelihood. It seems all the forecasting I've been seeing around gatherings of all sorts are pointing towards they're going to be well into the spring. And knowing the nature of that facility, the one thing that obviously had just a bit of a bet on that, there's being able to space each other out within an indoor environment, et cetera, et cetera. But then it's also looking at egress options of a space, ventilation systems, et cetera, et cetera. And we're not exactly cutting edge building tech that's like fully prepared to, receive large groups of people for hours and hours and hours on end, and feel like that's kind of well established. So yeah, if we have to err on a side, I'm certainly more inclined to err on the side of safety, and also erring on the side of being able to include more people. And I think there's a likelihood that there'd be a substantial portion of the population who would not feel safe or well enough to be able to gather in public that way. And my goal would be to try to find the most inclusive and participatory path forward, and meeting in person does not seem to be that path as it looks like right now.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we're just gonna have to look at doing Australian ballot, and then try to have maybe more informational meetings on Zoom or whatever, so that more people can, get involved. Instead of just having a couple informational meetings, you might need to have just a few more, so make sure everybody can get their input. But as far as in person, I don't think we'll be ready for that. So that's what I think direction we need to go.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
I have some time frame questions whenever it's time to go there.
Yeah, go ahead, Jacob. Yeah.
So I like the choose your own adventure analogy there. It's fabulous. So if we're looking at either Australian ballot or the potential of moving the meeting, both have, I think, some pretty serious time implications, it seems. I mean, moving the meeting, there are elected positions that would expire. We just worked so hard to get this budget, approval process kind of reoriented around our fiscal year. So the thought of like thwarting that by voting on a budget that we'd already be acting under again, if we were to move it substantially, feels a little disheartening. But then on the other end, if we need to be warning by mid-January, late January, I'm wondering what kind of pressure that puts on the budget committee and the budget development process. If I could be creating an issue here, a misinterpreting issue that doesn't actually exist, but it actually pushes up the time frame. Is that something we need to be aware of?
I think,
or if we need like a number declared in the warning.
yeah, I think that as far as the budget process goes, there's not a huge, other than the functionality of how the budget committee meets for this kind of stuff. I don't think there's a big issue timeline wise, because it would essentially be the same timeline we're on every year. The intent would be that we'd send out a letter to all the departments sometime, maybe this week or next, saying, hey, heads up, craft your budgets. The budget committee would start meeting either essentially the last week of December or first week of January. We'd plug and chug and then have the budget done by the 21st, so that we'd be able to.
So there's no additional pressure on that timing. That's just,
I don't think, as far as the budget goes, I don't think there's any huge pressure on trying to accelerate that process to meet the standard deadline. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. But the point about like unintended consequences around like officers' terms expiring, things like that, it's a good point. I will note that through the moving to Australian ballot option, should the board vote to do that, the way that we would elect officers would then be that anybody interested in a position would have to file essentially a letter of intent with Liz by a certain date in order to then get on the ballot. My guess is that would be sometime like around the first week of January, maybe.
Okay.
The one nice thing about our town is that we don't use optical scanners. So Liz and I are looking at pricing out how we could do ballots. If we went with like a standard ballot that everybody gets on election day that has like the little black marks down the side and it's all, those can be read by an optical scanner. We don't use those. And so we could print our own ballots, which could give us a more narrow window. We're not looking at like, they got to get to the printer to have a week turnaround. We can do that. It would also cost probably about $1,200 to have all the ballots printed. So if we can save funds and do it ourselves, we might look to do that. But I forget where I was going with that. But we would need to have anybody who is going to essentially nominate themselves for a position, have that intent to Liz. Whoops, am I frozen? Sorry if I froze there for a sec.
I got you.
Yeah. because the legislature did waive the requirement for a petition. Typically with Australian ballot voting for officers, there has to be a petition submitted with the individual's name, but that's been waived, so. Yeah.
But that would need to be done by early January, so who is present on the warning?
Yeah, they would have to have their name on the warning and on the ballot as it's ready. So we would need to basically get the word out for that, as soon as possible.
Or we can anticipate a whole lot of active write-in campaigns.
Yeah, or that could be, yeah. Yeah, essentially next meeting, the 21st, is when we're going to have to make formal decisions around this. Tonight can be kind of more of an open conversation around it, but the 21st is when we're going to have to make formal motions around how we're going to do it, when we're going to do it, all that kind of stuff. And then we need to basically, push out the public information around officer nominations and things immediately to kind of get that going. The other thing the state did allow, the legislature, I should say, is talking about doing is allowing towns to mail ballots to people. It's not a sure thing that they would do that, but they might pass legislation that allows the town to basically do a universal vote by mail thing. The trick there is that, like most things the legislature does, they're probably not going to attach funding to it. So if we did a universal vote by mail, we'd have to take into account the cost of postage and all that kind of stuff, printing envelopes.
Charlie, could
What
I
would
ask
the
you a
alter?
question?
Well, the alternative would be just a standard Australian ballot where you come to the polling place and you vote.
Oh,
Or-
of course, just sure,
Yeah,
for
or
sure.
you could request an absentee ballot prior as well, as you typically could, but we would not just unilaterally mail everybody in town a ballot. Yeah. Yeah, Sue, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just have a question. If you did go to Australian ballot, we would still hold town meeting day on town meeting day, right? That's when they would vote, correct? On town meeting day?
So this is one thing that I'm actually not 100% certain of how we would handle something and what we would call it. My interpretation, my understanding has been that if we vote by Australian ballot, town meeting day then becomes an informational meeting. So essentially we would hold an informational meeting the morning of town meeting day, but there'd be no voting. It would be more just a opportunity for people to get on a Zoom call and talk out stuff. Now, if we went by Australian ballot, we'd probably want to have other informational meetings prior to that too, to basically reach as many people as possible. But I think that technically, town meeting would essentially be an informational meeting. We could still call it town meeting.
I don't think so. I think it works. They have their information, like Richford, they have their informational meeting the night before
Right,
and then vote the day of town meeting.
right.
They
But
go
do
in
they
and
vote?
vote. Yeah.
But do they
So does
vote
Eatonburg.
do they vote from the floor? Or do
No.
they
No.
vote-
It's Australian ballot.
The Australian ballot, because they have their informational meeting like the night before, and then they come in and vote on town meeting day.
Right, as does Enosburg does that.
Yeah,
So then town meeting day is essentially just the polls are open from X
Yes.
to X, but there's no physical meeting.
no,
No,
Okay,
your informational meetings before that. That's what I'm
Yeah.
saying. We should have a few informational meetings
okay,
before it, like we already do already, but,
yeah.
um,
So then I guess if that's the way it is, and I might have misunderstood when I was talking with someone from SOS, but then maybe we wouldn't even have to have a physical meeting, quote unquote, on town meeting day. It would
no.
just be all the polls are open. So
no, that's
okay.
when the polls are open. Yeah.
I didn't realize that Richford does that by Australian ballot too.
And
Yes.
Enosburg,
Yeah,
Charlie, Enosburg also.
yeah. And again, just as a way back refresher, Montgomery's a floor town, and so in order to have things by Australian ballot outside of the COVID situation, we would have to vote at town meeting 1 to do things by Australian ballot, starting town meeting 2, and then going on from there.
Well, that could be on the ballot. That could be on the thing.
It could be on the warning.
Yeah.
So to move to talk about the warning, so we talked about the timeline issues, and I'll try to summarize this in like a memo so it's written down for people and get that out in the next day or two so everybody can kind of have this in front of them and digest it between now and the next meeting. Because I know that some of this is kind of hard to follow as we talk about it. So outside of timelines.
Sorry, could I just add just on that point? So one thing I was gonna ask, and I'm kind of with you, and I feel like I've got a pretty clear opinion, and I could take a vote tonight. But one thing that would be helpful, I think, is if you could help identify any of those other unintended consequences. I guess specifically around Australian ballot, because that's the one I'm leaning much more strongly towards that than postponing the meeting. I don't know if it might be worth seeing if there's anyone that has any appetite towards postponing the meeting. If not, we can just kind of like let go of that entirely. But if we wanted to consider that, I guess it'd be okay. What else we possibly anticipate that we want to be considering? So I guess that would be of value. I'm much more in favor of Australian ballot, and I would just want to know, okay, what are all the other ramifications other than town officer positions that we'd be stumbling into?
So I'll try to get that in the memo too, so that's encapsulated.
I appreciate that. Thank you for that.
So the next question around town meeting day and the warning itself has to do with like the warning itself and what's on the warning. And so in addition to all the standard things around, officer elections, the budget, the social agency requests, et cetera, the board can either put items on questions before the voters, or we could be directed to do so by a legally submitted petition. I'm not aware of any petitions circulating right now. That's not to say we won't get one, but if we do get a petition that is, legally appropriate and hits all the marks, we would then add that question to it. But in terms of things the board has talked about in the past and whether or not we want to add them, and again, we don't have to decide this tonight, but I want to put it out there. The first one is the ATV question. As much as I don't want to talk about ATVs ever again, we did get that petition earlier in the year. I think it was earlier this year. This year has been so weird. That was asking us to put the question to the voters at the same time as the bond vote. It was a petition that was legal in that it was signed by more than 50 voters. The signatures were verified. However, the question that they wanted us to put before the voters, we couldn't because of the way that the state statute works. So, the petitioners essentially submitted it in good faith, but didn't quite understand how the law works. So one question I've got for the board is, do we want to essentially look at that petition as being submitted in good faith and put that question on the warning for town meeting? And if not, do we circle back to them and say, hey, you've got 3 weeks to get a petition together?
My feeling is we should just put it on. I mean, it was a legitimate petition, and the reason we couldn't do it is because we weren't voting Australian ballot. But I mean, I think it would just kind of let us gauge what the people want. I mean, they want us to do it or not, and Australian ballot, more people could vote on it.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like we should put it on there.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
If it's a legal petition, I don't know if you have any choice, do you?
Yeah, so Merle, the trick was that the petition that was submitted was legal, quote unquote, in that they had the required signatures, the signatures checked out, there was enough of them. The problem was that they were asking us to put the question before the voters by Australian ballot on the same day that we did the bond vote. And because Montgomery is a floor town, we couldn't put the question before the voters in that manner. So technically it wasn't a legal petition, but it was a petition that was submitted in good faith with the requisite number of signatures, et cetera.
I want to ask, excuse me, Australian ballot may be the sensible way to go, even though I think you may find the majority of leaders are opposed to Australian ballot. If it does go to Australian ballot, it would be just one time, right? The 1 year
Yeah, unless we voted as a question on the warning, shall the voters of Montgomery move
Oh,
to an
yeah.
Australian ballot
Yeah.
system? Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
Don't
the
put that
COVID thing is
question
a
on.
one-time off. Yeah, I mean, that's something the board could do, and we can entertain that discussion as well. But any other thoughts on the ATV question? The reason I ask is because if the board decides that we don't want to unilaterally do it, I do want to make sure the petitioners are aware of that so they have an opportunity to resubmit one and don't feel like they got caught off guard.
I know I got a couple of emails on that Australian ballot question opposing it. Wondered if what I thought, and I agree, not to ever go to Australian ballot. Excuse me, except something like this is kind of an emergency situation, maybe.
Thanks.
Harley or anybody, has there been any pulse on any progress of potentially an outside group of sort of both
No.
factions or any, no
Yeah.
word on, okay.
Yeah, I think any hopes of the two sides coming together to find some amicable, kumbaya situation are not going to happen.
Okay.
At least not that I'm aware of.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it is fortuitous timing of their sort of misdirection of the question that it does actually end up becoming plausible with the fact that it seems like, I know we haven't voted, but it seems quite likely the Senate of the board seems to be moving towards Australian ballot. And so to that end, I mean, I would say, yes, if it's a technicality, that is the only reason why we wouldn't otherwise consider the petition, and that technicality has been resolved by virtue of circumstance, then I would say, yeah, that's the technicality is resolved and everything else about it is legal, then we should proceed with including it. I would have a hard time arguing other. And I would just also, just to Merle's point, I would also go on record while we're talking about very strongly support this being a one-time emergency move, and that this would not herald in some redirection of town meeting as being, shifting to Australian ballot beyond this one emergency setting. So I just figured a well-written discussion, put that out there as well for the record.
Jacob.
Yeah, I agree. I think that we should put that article on for people to vote on. And yes, as far as the Australian ballot deal, 1 year emergency situation, because I do think that so many people do feel empowered being able to attend town meeting and voice their concerns, what they're upset about, what they are very happy about, and everything in between.
All right, any other thoughts on the ATV question, just while we're on it, before we move on?
Well, I think with Australian ballot, they still will have chance to, put their opinions out there when we have the informational meetings. I mean,
yeah, certainly.
They still have a chance there too. So, yeah.
We expect lots of conversation around that with the amount of pre-warning that we'll have for this process.
We'll probably have a record turnout of voters for if that's on our
It's a low bar for.
All right, cool. So it sounds like we have a consensus forming that we are not going to basically ask them to redo a petition, which was my main concern. So good. Another item regarding the warning for town meeting, and this is one that we don't have completely finalized yet as to what form it would take. And this feeds into the wastewater project. So back when we were first talking about the bond vote and the vote around that, we had discussed that there would be a couple other opportunities that would involve the community voting on aspects of the project that would more or less make it advance or not. One of those is going to be, in order to make the financing of the project work, very similar to the water system, we would have to essentially find some form of broad-based community support for the bond indebtedness. If we think about our water system, there's the user fees, et cetera, that pay for it. There's the bond payments, but there's also the annual appropriation in the municipal budget that helps offset the indebtedness to make the user fees affordable. So the wastewater system, there's an element of that it's looking like in order to make this feasible and affordable, the town would have to adopt some measure like that. We're still trying to figure out what the financing picture looks like there. And in doing that, we have to figure out what that amount of money would be annually. But the two forms that it might take would be either something similar to how the town does the water system bond payment, where it's baked into the annual budget every year. The other way to do it would be to essentially make it like a property tax assessment on your tax bill. That would be some small amount that would kind of show up as an item. One of the things that we're trying to clarify on that front would be essentially how to structure it in a way where it would be subject to state payments, so that if there was, an additional X on people's property taxes to support this, it would not be something that would be outside of what the state looks at when establishing their state payments, with the idea that income sensitivity would be addressed to some degree through that, if that makes sense.
Right.
So,
my understanding of when we put the wastewater was that we couldn't use the whole town couldn't, not like the water system, couldn't pay for. I thought it was just supposed to be paid for by the users.
Yeah, so I think we've found a way around that. And that's what we're trying to nail down now. So I'm coming to the board tonight with like a very lack of clarity around this.
Okay.
And I'm hoping that between now and the warning, we'll nail this down. I just wanted to put it out there that one other item on the warning may very likely be this sewer benefit assessment, whatever form that takes. But that is something that we would then put before the voters. One interesting thing that this conversation has brought up, though, is that with the town's portion of the water bond payment, and Mark, maybe you remember this, but when that first started, was there ever like an affirmative vote by the town to do that, or was it just something that showed up in the budget every year and just kind of
No, the whole town had to vote on that in order to had to vote on doing that for the water system, and it just barely passed because a lot of people were like, how come we should pay for the water system when we don't get any benefit from it? And so it was a big deal. So I'm saying it's going to be it's going to be a big sell for the wastewater too, for all the taxpayers to pay for it. So no, it was a vote. It had to be.
So if it was,
actually voted on that every year because it's in the budget, so it's actually voted on every year. That 13,700 plus, that's a budget item, so it's actually voted on every year. But like Mark is right, initially you had to vote to raise that amount by taxes.
Mm. We had to vote to do that bond for the whole town. Yeah, to raise that amount by taxes. Yes.
So was that part of the bond payment, the bond vote? Or was it a separate vote?
I think it was. I thought it was.
I haven't had a chance to go back and look, but I guess the question I've got is if the town voted in the affirmative to essentially pay a certain amount out of the annual budget towards that, have we been doing this wrong? And every year, do we actually have to vote on that amount in the budget? If that makes sense, like if the town voted to do something every year, would we have to then vote to undo that? Or do we need to vote on that amount every year in the budget?
It's a budget item, 13,700 and something.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
so
but right.
Vote to approve that budget, you're voting on it basically.
Yeah, but so it's baked into the contingent select board, right? But if the town at some point voted this year and every year going forward, we're going to allocate this amount of money out of the municipal budget.
Yeah.
Therefore treated separately. It's just a weird, it's not a huge deal. I wasn't sure.
I don't think you could do that and say, well, from now 2021 to 2042, we're going to appropriate 15,000 for the sewer bond vote. I don't think you can do that.
Yeah, it just makes planning from a financial perspective difficult because, for example, at this year's town meeting, well, actually, it wouldn't work this year because we can't make 4 amendments. But at a normal town meeting, the town could offer up an amendment to the budget that says, we don't want to pay that $13,000. That comes out of the budget. And then all of a sudden, the water system becomes unaffordable.
No, I think when the original bond for the water system, that was included on the original bond vote, was the town would that amount of money towards a bond payment. The whole town would. And then the rest of the water system was furnished by the
Users.
Yeah.
So I think that was the part of the original bond vote. I'd have to look back, but
Yeah.
maybe
Which we then found out we can't do.
Yeah.
Right? The USDA came back and said, you can't do that, but they didn't make us stop doing it, which is good.
Yeah. So,
okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll try to get more clarity on what that might look like. And then, like I told the folks that we're working on this budget with, like, we need to have a number. We can't just say like some amount of money. So that's another item regarding the warning that we'll need to discuss and figure out how to put what it would look like on there. The only other warning item that I just wanted to put out there again for discussion was around the police services. So just as a refresher, we did get a petition in to put that item back on the town meeting warning. The last time the board discussed it, we basically said, well, one, the petition wasn't legal because it didn't have the right number of signatures. And then the consensus was kind of that the board didn't want to unilaterally put that back on the warning. So I just wanted to bring that up one more time because I would circle back to the petitioner to push them to, if they wanted it, to then get a real petition in.
I really don't think we need to push that.
Yep.
I don't really feel like we need to put that on. I mean, last year was pretty clear that that was not wanted. And this petition wasn't valid, so
yep.
He couldn't get, I don't know how many, he didn't get very many signatures, the petitioners. Yeah. I really feel like we shouldn't go there.
Okay. Anybody else have a different opinion? I just want, again, I'm only asking because I do want to just make one more effort to circle back to the petitioner to let them know that, so that if they do want to put the effort in, they have the time to and don't feel blindsided that we didn't do it.
I agree with Mark. I think that the town spoke loud and clear last March.
Okay. All right, great. So that's pretty much it for the conversation tonight around town meeting planning. Again, I will try to send out a memo following up on this with a lot of this stuff kind of articulated in one spot with a time frame on it so that it's in one place folks can look at again. So then just briefly to circle back to the item C here, the wastewater and streetscapes project. I mentioned it earlier, but we've essentially paused the work on this until that next installment of the engineering planning advance money comes through. I thought that would be approved by now, but we haven't seen it yet. But that's basically the trigger to continue the work with Hoyle Tanner that would then get us into those design stages. We are in the process of submitting for the reimbursement for that second slug of about 55,000. So we should be seeing that come into our accounts in the relatively near future. Anything else under town meeting or the wastewater streetscapes projects before we move on? Okay, hearing nothing, we'll move on. Item E, the Communications Union District update. I have no update on that front from Everett or anybody, so we'll carry that forward. There is a survey out there, though, if folks haven't seen it. The Union District did put a survey out, so take it, tell your friends to take it.
One note that I'm wondering if maybe next time you happen to be chatting with him, it was, oh gosh, I guess a couple of weeks ago now, during that spell when I was on my break, I bumped into a surveyor, a contractor working for VTEL, who was up on the Black Falls Road. Has this already been discussed, VTEL and their access in the region? Okay, I just want to make sure I wasn't covering over old ground. So he was cruising around doing basically surveying of signal potential off of VTEL's tower. In this case, he was looking at the one off of J Peak. And dude was getting like full on broadband. He was like a live streaming ESPN like on the road outside my house. And I was like, oh my God. And so I called VTEL and they're like, oh yeah, sorry, we're not taking any new customers on the service. And I was like, oh, are you going to be expanding that service at all? And they're like, not anytime within the next couple of few months, but try back. I'm like, can I get it on a waiting list? And like, we don't keep a waiting list, but try back. I'm like, do you notify publicly in any regard that I can be monitoring? They're like, no, just keep calling. So I'm like, all right, so are you just inviting like all of Montgomery to call you on a daily basis? Or perhaps there's maybe more coordinated effort, perhaps through the CUD. But we are like line of sight with the tower getting full on broadband from a telecom company operating in our region, completely unbeknownst to me, which I, apropos of nothing. But geez, if there's a place to lean into this and be like, what can we do to convince VTEL to expand their service? Because again, dude was like watching live ESPN on his laptop on the middle of Black Falls Road. I was like, okay, what are we doing right now? Just thought I'd put that out there for whatever that's worth.
Yeah, I'll ping Everett on that just to see. I'm sure it's on their radar. Yeah.
I hope so.
Um,
Slash, if we all have a guerrilla marketing campaign that everyone calls VTEL and bombards.
Yeah, I was
them
gonna
with
say
calls
we could
from
organize.
Montgomery.
We could organize that.
Right? Demand.
All right, moving on. Item F under this. So our last meeting, we had discussed this potential grant opportunity to potentially get some money to help with some work on the Grange Hall. Long story short is I talked with Scott and Sue a little bit more about this, and we looked into some of the grant details. And essentially, I think we need to get the building listed as a listed on the National Historic Register before we would be able to go after those funds. So that's been paused for now. We might pick up the work to get that listed at some point, but for now, that grant is not something we're going to pursue. So I just wanted to make the board aware of that.
And we are going to work on getting it on the register.
Yep. Great. So with that, we'll move on to new business. The first item on the agenda under new business is overweight truck permits. We have one permit request from Faro Enterprises. I'm going to share my screen real quick. Can everybody see that?
What are the weights on there? I can't quite see it. Oh, okay, yeah.
Oh, there we go.
Okay, 69,000, 90,000, 99,000.
Yeah,
Okay,
that looks all right.
all right. So if that looks good,
I'll
we'll
make a
entertain
motion. I'll make a motion to approve the Faro Enterprises overweight truck permit.
Great. Is there a second? A second from Jacob. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. All those in favor of approving the overweight truck permit for Faro Enterprises, please signify by saying aye or raising your hand. Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great. So I'll get that back.
Thank you all. Good night.
Thanks, Merle. So I'll get that back to him. Next up is the added item under warrants or payment authorizations. Came to my attention today that we might not have been doing this correctly since we went remote. Essentially, open meeting law requires that a majority of the select board members take an action or make a decision only in the context of a duly warned meeting. So essentially, we can't individually go to the clerk's office and sign these things outside of a meeting. That is not something which is okay under open meeting law, even though we've gone to this remote setup. So the two options we've got here are that we can either vote at a meeting like this to identify specific persons to whom payments can be made for specific purposes, and then allow Aaron to then make those payments going forward. But we would have to pass a motion to be very specific. So for every single creditor, business, employee, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, we would have to pass a motion to approve payments to them outside of this, which to me seems not feasible. The second option would be that the select board authorize one or more members to review and approve orders on behalf of the entire board. This would mean that one or two of us would be authorized to go in and sign the warrants outside of a duly warned meeting and without all of us doing it collectively. I guess the third way to do it would be that we could screen share each individual warrant at the end of each meeting and then walk through them together. That might be hard feasibly because they're a stack this thick, and you know. So I think that the most functional way to do this would be to authorize one or two of us to essentially review and approve these expenditures.
Charlie, it should always be two of you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I believe that's how the school board works right now, if
Yeah.
memory serves. For what it's worth, there's some precedent.
Yeah.
Would those two people have to go in at the same time to sign together?
Yes, I believe so, that they would have to go into the office together to then review and sign the warrants.
Okay.
Yeah.
And would you have to then warn a meeting at the time that you sign?
No, because if it was
It's not a quorum.
yeah, if it's two of us, it's not a meeting. Yeah. So
I
I
would,
vote
yeah,
for option two.
I would be willing to do that. Yeah.
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 I mean, I guess what I would say is just given everyone's work schedule, it would probably make the most sense if Mark and I did this, because we seem to have the most flexible schedules of being able to just pick random times to go into the office.
You do not want me responsible for that.
So Jacob can't do this.
Plus, a lot of other bills are for the roads and stuff too, so I can
Yeah, and yeah, also with Mark, with the road stuff, it would be good, and the water stuff too, to have your eyes on it. So I guess if that's what we want to do, then the motion that would have to be made is that I move that we appoint Charlie Hancock and Mark Briette to approve and sign orders for municipal expenditures for a period of time commencing December 7th through, let's say, July 1st. And we can revisit it then. So is there a second to that motion?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, we have a second from Suzanne. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye or raising your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great, motion carries. Thank you. And sorry for not catching that earlier. Second added item here is the dog bite. This was circulated to everybody this afternoon at 2 p.m. I spoke with the gentleman on the phone.
Charlie?
Yes.
Charlie, I received nothing, and I'm
sorry.
And I get all the dog bite. Did you get this form filled out?
No. So I'm sorry, it was circulated to the board. The complaint was circulated. This is something that just came to light today. I spoke to the individual and I asked him to submit a written complaint per the
We
ordinance.
have to have this form filled out. This
Yes.
is the legal form.
Yeah.
The reason you didn't get it, Sue, is because he didn't go to the hospital.
Yeah, and he wouldn't have. It right in the book, right in the health officer book, it says, it doesn't, yes, if they go to the hospital, I automatically do. But
Yeah.
if a person was bitten, it is to be reported to the town health officer by either the person that was bitten, a veterinarian, or a parent or guardian.
Yep. Yeah, so again, this just came to light today. I talked with the gentleman, he walked me through what happened. The full, his side of it is kind of enumerated or explained in the email that was sent out to the board. Brent has tried to follow up with the owner of the dog. Oddly enough, this dog resides at the same residence that Bella resided at. If anyone remembers Bella, Bella was the last dog that we had to have put down.
Oh,
it is-
you mean right here at Lumber's house, right here down the road from me?
Yeah.
That, there's nobody living in that house.
There apparently is, I don't have the name.
All right, Charlie, are you gonna get it to me so I can call the owner? I have to call the victim. I have to get all of the information.
Yeah, I don't have the contact info for the dog owner yet. But
Well,
I
who
will
has
get
it?
you.
Do you have the information for who was bitten?
Yes, and I will send that to you immediately after the meeting, Sue. Oops, I'm frozen again. Am I unfrozen now?
It was 54 Mountain Road.
Yeah. But I don't
somebody
yet
was
have the contact. No, it was not 50, it was not 54, it was next to 54, 40 something. 54 was where he was when he got bit.
Must have been 48. Yeah.
Yeah, I think 48. Anyway, Stu, I'll forward you the information that I've got. Brent was following up, trying to get the information from the dog owners. He left a pretty detailed message at their place.
All right, I'll contact Brent also, but Charlie, it's supposed to come, I mean, unless you don't want me to handle that, that's fine.
No, it's fine, Sue. Again, this is one of those things that just like showed up this afternoon on my radar, and I haven't had a chance to really dig into it that much before tonight. But I will forward you everything that I've got as soon as.
And I'll contact Brent to get what he has.
Yeah. So anyway, per the ordinance that is in effect, just to review it, it's under vicious dogs, item 10. If the complaint can be sustained, well, I'm sorry, we need to essentially collect all the information we have and then hold a hearing within 5 business days from receipt of the complaint. Part of that is notifying the dog owner of the hearing. So we need to get that information together before we can do all that. And then basically the board has the ability to, if the complaint is sustained, we can declare a few things. We can declare that the owner physically restrained the dog. We can have the dog impounded, or we can have the dog destroyed, is the language the ordinance uses. So anyway, we'll need to schedule.
The confinement's for 10 days, if the owner is willing to do that. If not, then the dog does have to be removed from the premises.
Yeah. So anyway, that's just a heads up that at some point towards the end of the week, we might have to have a real brief Zoom call on this to address it.
Did we ever get a dog catcher or?
No, Keith resigned, and we have yet to find a replacement for him.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. All right, so Sue, I'll get you that information, and we'll follow up with Brent, and then just keep an eye out for a special meeting briefly later this week to handle this.
So the person that complained is the person that was bitten,
Yes, correct.
and you have all of his information.
I have his contact info via email, so I will.
And
Again,
his address and his telephone number?
I don't have that, but he's responsive to email, and so I have his telephone number, I think.
Okay,
I think his address was in the email at the bottom.
Yeah, it might be.
okay.
Okay. All right. Yeah, he's got an email and work address. You're right, Suzanne.
Okay.
Correct. Great. All right. Last order of business here for tonight is just the road crew discussion. And again, that's discussing employment. So that is something that we would move into executive session should there be a motion to. So
I will make a motion to move into executive session to discuss
Okay.
personnel.
Okay,
All
great.
right.
So we have a motion
I'll
from
vote.
Mark to move into executive session to discuss personnel matters. Is there a
Okay,
second?
bye-bye. Leave the meeting.
Bye, Sue.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, we have a second from Suzanne. All those in favor of moving into executive session to discuss the road crew employment, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, so at this point, we're going to move into executive session. I'm going to pause the recording. Howard, at this point, this discussion is one of the few that the board has itself without the public. Okay, thanks, Howard. All right, so I'm going to pause the recording now. We are now out of executive session and back into the recording of the meeting. Are there any motions to be made at this point?
I will make a motion to terminate the employment of Blaine Cattell for the town of Montgomery, effective tomorrow, December 8th. We will discuss it. Yeah, that's my motion.
Okay, we have a motion from Mark to terminate Blaine's employment effective December 8th. Is there a second? I will second that motion. We have a motion made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
I do.
Motion carries.
I just want to go on record and say it was a hard decision, but it had to be made.
Yeah, no, I agree, Mark. I don't think this is a decision that any of us ever want to have to make.
No, it isn't.
Yeah.
No.
Okay, with that, we are at the end of our agenda. Yes, at the end. And with that, a motion to adjourn is always in order.
I'll make that motion.
We have a motion from Mark. Is there a second?
A second.
From Suzanne. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we will vote. All those in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great, motion carries. Meeting's adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Night.
Have a good evening.
Good night, thank you.
Yeah.
Night.